Pro wrestling has always courted controversy to drum up interest from fans, but when heat crosses the line into scandal, it can leave a stain that brings the kind of attention that big companies like WWE don't want. Over the years, WWE's longtime chairman and CEO, Vincent Kennedy McMahon, has been hit with numerous sexual misconduct allegations. The first on record came in the 1980s from former referee Rita Chatterton, who accused McMahon of sexually assaulting her inside of a limousine. Her story has since been corroborated by former wrestler Mario Mancini in a 2022 piece in New York Magazine. Chatterton filed a lawsuit in December 2022 with the issue settled out of court for a multi-million-dollar sum. In 2006, McMahon was accused of sexual harassment at a tanning salon in Florida, but would ultimately escape any charges for the alleged incident. At the same time as the Chatterton lawsuit, a separate tanning spa employee from California filed a sexual assault claim in court. As part of a broader investigation into McMahon, the Wall Street Journal also uncovered that the longtime CEO had paid an estimated $19.6 million in unrecorded hush money payments to settle sexual misconduct claims between 2006 and 2022. The controversy ultimately led to McMahon retiring from his position for 6 months before returning to WWE ahead of the company's recent merger with UFC to become the TKO Group. He now holds the title of executive chairman, but has been removed from day-to-day creative duties relating to the on-screen product. One man that always finds a way to make news is CM Punk, who has had more than his share of controversy over the years, both inside and outside WWE. It was his departure from the company nearly a decade ago that has been the flashpoint for all kinds of problems. After a 9-year run in WWE, Punk walked out in January 2014, just after that year's Royal Rumble, and refused to return. Punk claimed to have received his termination papers on the same day as his wedding to AJ Lee later that year. After his contractual non-compete period ended, Punk appeared in a now infamous episode of Colt Cabana's Art of Wrestling podcast. In the episode, the pair discussed Punk's departure and the reasons behind it.
And actually, the big thing that led to my decision was my health.
Punk would particularly take aim at WWE doctor Chris Amon. Amon, with WWE's support, would sue Punk and Cabana for defamation in 2015. The case would go to trial 3 years later, and the court battle continued to air plenty of dirty laundry relating to Punk's tenure with WWE. The jury would eventually rule in favor of Punk and Cabana. In the course of the lawsuit in 2018, Cabana filed his own lawsuit against Punk, alleging breach of contract and fraud over Punk's alleged agreement to pay his legal fees. Punk would then file a counterclaim against Cabana before both cases were settled in 2019 without compensation, according to PW Insider. The breakdown in the pair's relationship would eventually spill over into AEW, leading to Punk's well-documented outburst at a post-show media scrum following All Out in September 2022. Punk was fired from AEW in September 2023 and returned to WWE at Survivor Series 2023 after almost a decade away, earning a raucous ovation from his hometown Chicago crowd. Owen Hart's tragic and untimely passing has remained one of the most devastating and controversial moments in WWE history. In the prime of his life at just 34 years old, Hart would die suddenly after a horrific accident during the 1999 Over the Edge pay-per-view. As part of his gimmick as the Blue Blazer, Hart was slated to be lowered down to the ring from the rafters on a harness. After the quick-release trigger was set off, he fell 78 feet and landed chest-first on the top rope. Despite several attempts to revive him, Hart died in the hospital from internal bleeding due to blunt force trauma, with the sudden impact severing his aorta. Despite one of the company's performers dying in the ring early in the broadcast, as commentator Jim Ross announced to fans watching, WWE opted to go through with the event in a highly controversial decision. Hart's family would later sue WWE due to the dangerous nature of the stunt, eventually being awarded $18 million. The manufacturer of the harness system was also a defendant against the Hart family, but it was dismissed from the case after the settlement was reached. Owen's widow, Martha Hart, has remained critical of WWE over the years. She has been reluctant to allow the promotion to use Owen's name or likeness, while also shutting down the potential of a Hall of Fame induction. Martha has instead linked up with AEW to honor her late husband's contribution to the wrestling industry. Nearly 30 years before his brief retirement, Vince McMahon was facing potential jail time. The U.S. Department of Justice indicted the then WWF chairman with charges of conspiring to distribute steroids. In 1991, Dr. George Zahorian III, a former ringside doctor for WWE, was convicted of illegally supplying anabolic steroids to numerous athletes, including WWF wrestlers. During Zahorian's trial, authorities alleged he had supplied drugs directly to McMahon at his Titan Towers office. McMahon stood trial in 1994. A number of high-profile wrestlers, including Hulk Hogan, Rick Rude, and The Ultimate Warrior, took the stand to testify, with the majority denying their boss had ever supplied them with steroids.
I'm not a steroid abuser, and I do not use steroids.
The only wrestler who claimed McMahon had pressured him into taking steroids was Kevin Nails Wachholtz, who wrestled for the promotion in the early 1990s. He had been fired after a heated confrontation with McMahon, and ultimately McMahon's defense used the personal issues between the two in their favor. After 16 hours of deliberation from the jury, McMahon was found not guilty of some of the charges, while others were dismissed due to insufficient evidence. As the trial went on, McMahon was forced to hand over control of WWE to his wife Linda, but he would regain his duties once he was acquitted. The use of performance-enhancing drugs remained prevalent in pro wrestling, leading to WWE introducing an official wellness policy in 2008. One of the most scandalous moments in WWE history centered around an infamous plane ride from England to the United States in 2002, as a large portion of the roster traveled back from the Insurrection pay-per-view. There were a litany of dramas that occurred during the course of the 7-hour journey, which both the roster and management attributed to heavy consumption of alcohol. One of the first incidents that made the news was a shoot fight between the late Curt Hennig and a then-rookie Brock Lesnar, with the pair scuffling down the aisle of the plane. A number of other WWE stars, including Triple H, Finlay, and Paul Heyman, ultimately had to intervene to separate them, but it wasn't enough to save Hennig from being released shortly after the incident. Other incidents on the flight included Dustin Rhodes allegedly serenading his ex-wife Terry. Scott Hall was also fired as a result of the plane ride after becoming intoxicated and reportedly making vulgar comments towards flight staff before passing out. The worst incident on the trip involved Ric Flair, who was alleged to have sexually harassed 2 female flight attendants, Tara Lynn Capilano and Heidi Doyle, exposing himself to the women and allegedly forcing them to touch his genitals. Capilano and Doyle filed a lawsuit 2 years later, but WWE settled out of court with both women. The allegations again surfaced in 2021 with an episode of Dark Side of the Ring, recounting the events of the trip and centering primarily around Flair's misconduct. After the 2019 Crown Jewel event in Saudi Arabia, a flight back to the United States carrying close to 200 wrestlers and other employees was stuck on the tarmac for an extended period due to what officials claimed were mechanical issues. Former WWE commentator Hugo Savinovich explained a different side of the story, which detailed a monetary conflict between WWE and the Saudi government over an estimated $60 million in unpaid funds to WWE before the show. The story goes that in light of the money conflict, Vince McMahon ordered that the Saudi Arabian TV feed for the event be cut. Savinovich said, referring to Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman,
and that got the prince upset, and it stopped him from leaving the country and got him off the plane.
McMahon and some other top WWE brass had already left on different flights. The back and forth reportedly resulted in the agreed money eventually being paid to WWE, but the damage had already been done between the two parties, and the performers and staff were essentially collateral damage. After being stranded for almost 24 hours, numerous members of the roster who were part of the Saudi show missed out on the following SmackDown taping, which forced a major reshuffle to the program. A number of WWE stars took to social media throughout the delay to complain, and some have been reluctant to work events in Saudi Arabia in the years that have followed. One of the most controversial moments in WWE history actually involved the finish to a match, of all things. WWE Champion Bret Hart was slated to take on longtime rival Shawn Michaels in the main event of Survivor Series 1997, ending a lengthy feud in Hart's home country of Canada. Hart had inked a deal with competing promotion WCW, and Vince McMahon wanted him to lose his title to Michaels, not wanting to risk having Bret show up on a rival promotion's show with the WWF title. Hart and Michaels had a long history of personal animosity, so he refused to put Michaels over in Montreal, offering instead to drop the title the following night on Raw. Hart agreed to a planned disqualification finish, which would allow him to retain the championship. However, under the direction of McMahon, a small group of WWF employees put together and executed a plan which would see referee Earl Hebner call for the bell when Hart was locked in the sharpshooter, despite the champ not actually submitting. Michaels was declared the new champion as chaos erupted inside the arena. The unscripted moment resulted in an infuriated Hart spitting at McMahon at ringside before drawing the letters WCW in the air. Backstage after the match, an enraged Hart would become embroiled in a heated locker room altercation and punch McMahon. On the following episode of Raw, McMahon, with an obvious black eye, would utter this famous line: "The referee did not screw Bret Hart. Shawn Michaels certainly did not screw Bret Hart, nor did Vince McMahon screw Bret Hart. I truly believe that Bret Hart screwed Bret Hart." The WWE roster would begin to question McMahon's leadership at the time, given the underhanded tactics he displayed at Survivor Series. Hart would ultimately return to the company 13 years later, reconciling with both Michaels and McMahon. But the Montreal Screwjob will live on in infamy as one of the most unforgettable scandals the business has ever seen. Chris Benoit was regarded as one of the best in-ring technicians of all time, carving out an incredible career in the 1990s and 2000s. On the weekend of June 24, 2007, the Canadian star was slated to compete against CM Punk at the Vengeance pay-per-view, but after he failed to arrive for the event, WWE ordered a welfare check to his home in Georgia. Police would discover the bodies of Benoit, his wife Nancy, and their son Daniel upon investigation, then conclude there were no other suspects in the case, ruling that Benoit had killed his family, then himself. Toxicology reports revealed that both Nancy and Daniel had Xanax in their systems, while Chris had Xanax, hydrocodone, and an elevated level of testosterone from a synthetic form of the hormone. Further testing conducted on Benoit after his death by the Sports Legacy Institute found that the 40-year-old's brain was similar to that of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient. He was reported to have had an advanced form of dementia. The institute concluded that repeated concussions can lead to dementia, which can contribute to severe behavioral problems.
We think we have great anatomical damage here from previous trauma. We think that's the leading cause.
The night after Benoit's death was confirmed, the company aired a 3-hour tribute episode of Raw in honor of Benoit's life and career. But 26 hours later, after more news regarding his death had come to light, Vince McMahon would deliver a speech on ECW, marking the final time the former world champion's name would be mentioned on the company's programming. In the years that have followed, Benoit has essentially been erased from WWE history where possible, precluding any kind of Hall of Fame induction his career may have merited. This tragic incident has left a major dark cloud over WWE to this day, and has changed the way the company treats head injuries and steroid-related issues.